Think about this. You could live well past 100. Seriously.
It sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
But like a child born back in 2007 has a 50-50 chance of seeing their 104th birthday.
Wow.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a close look at The 100-Year Life by Linda Gratton and Andrew Scott.
A really fascinating book.
Definitely. And our goal for you listening, our mission, is pretty simple. Pull out the practical stuff from this book, the things you can actually use to, navigate this potentially much longer life.
Yeah, what can you do with this information right now?
Exactly. We're talking key ideas, real-world examples, and what it all kind of boils down to for your future.
And we're drawing straight from their analysis, looking at how society's shifting and what that means for, well, everything, your work, your money, your personal life.
So this increase in how long we live, it's pretty dramatic.
It really is. The book points out, if you look back, every single decade since like the 1840s, we've gained 2 or 3 years in life expectancy. It's quite consistent.
2 or 3 years per decade.
Yeah. Incredible, right. And initially, the big wins were, tackling infant mortality, getting kids through those first few dangerous years.
Makes sense.
But now the focus is much more on pushing back against the diseases of old age, things like heart disease, cancer, dementia.
So for a lot of people listening, maybe even you listening right now, living to 100 isn't some, sci-fi fantasy.
No, it's becoming, well, maybe not a certainty, but a very real possibility, something you actually need to plan for.
And the book puts it so well. A lifetime that lasts a century is a gift that few of us are prepared for.
Mm-hmm. That unpreparedness. That's a big theme. That feeling of being a bit adrift when you suddenly realize your life might be decades longer than you or your parents ever imagined. We really need to dig into that.
Okay, let's zoom in on that being unprepared. The book argues that the old way of thinking about life, that simple 3-stage model.
You mean like education, then work, then retirement?
Exactly that. It just isn't sustainable anymore. It worked okay, maybe even pretty well, for earlier generations. They use this example, Jack, born in 1945.
Right, Jack's generation.
He finished school around 20, got a job during what they call the golden age of employment, stable jobs, pensions. He worked for about 42 years, retired in his early 60s, and, sadly passed away at 70, which was pretty typical then.
And financially, things were, well, simpler for Jack, relatively speaking.
Yeah, the calculations show he only needed to save maybe 4.3% of his income each year to fund that retirement.
Which sounds incredibly low now.
Doesn't it? Plus, he worked for, 42 years to support maybe 8 years of retirement. Pretty good ratio.
And the broader context, as you mentioned, was those company pensions, often defined benefit ones, plus more generous state pensions, those pay-as-you-go systems where current workers' taxes pay for current retirees. But, and this is a huge but, the book stresses, those safety nets are fraying badly.
Which brings us to Jimmy, born in 71, and Jane, born in 98.
Right. Their reality is completely different. Company pensions like Jack had, mostly gone. State pensions, less generous, and under huge demographic pressure. Fewer workers supporting more retirees. It's just unsustainable math in the long run.
So the book's core message here is pretty stark, isn't it?
Yeah, they state it bluntly. With company pension schemes now scarce and state pensions becoming less generous, the overwhelming message is simple. The burden to save is being shifted increasingly to the individual.
It's on us now.
Pretty much entirely.
So for Jimmy, born in 71, the financial picture gets, daunting. To get the same kind of retirement income level as Jack, aiming for maybe 50% of his final salary by age 65, the initial calculation suggests he'd need to save a massive 17.2% of his income every single year.
17%? That's huge. Most people struggle to save anything near that.
Exactly. And his work-to-retirement ratio is way worse than Jack's. The book suggests even if Jimmy manages a more, let's say, realistic 10% savings rate.
Which is still a big ask for many.
Right. Even then, he's probably looking at working well into his early 70s to hit that same kind of pension target.
Oof. Okay, so that's Jimmy. What about Jane, born in 98? She's likely living even longer.
Yeah, the challenges just multiply for her. The book runs the numbers again. Even if she saves 10% consistently and wants that same 50% final salary pension, she might have to work into her 80s.
Her 80s.
That's what their model suggests, and it really hammers home the scale of this change. They put it plainly. Compared to Jack, Jane might live 30 years longer, but she might have to work 20 years longer too.
Oh.
And they ask, gift or curse?
That really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What does a working life that long actually feel like? Is it even desirable?
So if that old 3-stage life is basically obsolete for many of us.
Yeah.
What replaces it?
Well, the book proposes this idea of a multi-stage life.
Okay.
Instead of that straight linear path, school,
Or
work, retire, it's going to be more dynamic, more
mm,
back and forth.
like periods focused on different things.
Exactly. Maybe a phase where you're really focused on career and earning, then maybe a period more focused on family or community work, or even stepping back to reskill entirely.
Ah, okay. So not just one long slog of work.
Hopefully not. And this leads to a really key insight for everyone listening, something the book emphasizes. The gift of living for longer means you don't have to be forced into either choices.
You mean like choosing between career or family or work or learning?
Precisely. You might have the time across a longer life to do more, just maybe not all at once in the way we used to think. It's about breaking free from that predictable linear path, what they call lockstep.
So no more everyone marching along at the same pace through the same life stages.
Right. This multi-stage life offers potentially way more flexibility and different possibilities. You might lean into finance for a decade, then pivot to something with more purpose, maybe take a few years for intensive learning.
But that sounds like a lot of change, a lot
Yes.
of transitions.
It is, and that's a crucial point. In the old three-stage life, there were really only two big transitions. School to work, work to retirement. Simple enough,
Hmm.
but with more stages. You'll have more
Yeah.
transitions. Moving between these different phases becomes the norm, not the exception.
And that requires new skills, presumably.
Absolutely. Things like adaptability, resilience, being comfortable with uncertainty, constantly learning new things, and critically, being able to build new networks and connections as you move through different phases.
We all need to become better at managing change, basically.
That's a good way to put it. The book even hints at a potential coming HR battle.
Oh.
Yeah, like individuals wanting this flexibility to design their multi-stage lives, but companies, which are often built for predictability and that old three-stage model, they might resist.
The individual versus the system. That'll be interesting to watch play out.
Definitely. And this need for flexibility and managing transitions leads directly into another huge concept in the book, something just as vital as money,
Which is
your intangible assets.
intangible. Like not money or property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The stuff that doesn't show up on a bank statement but is absolutely critical for a long, productive, and happy life. Things like your friendships, your knowledge, your skills, your health, your relationships.
Okay.
The authors urge us to think of these as genuine assets. Assets that need managing, investing in, and protecting from depreciation, just like you'd manage a financial portfolio.
I like that framing. Asset management for your whole life, not just your finances. So how do they break these down?
They group them into three main categories. First up are productive assets.
Okay. Sounds work-related.
It is. These are your skills, your knowledge, your professional networks, your reputation, basically anything that helps you be productive and succeed in your work and career.
And the book says we need to focus on acquiring skills that are...
Valuable and rare. That's the key combination they highlight, as they put it. The emphasis should be on acquiring stocks of skills and knowledge that are valuable. In other words, they are in demand as useful and rare.
So not just any skill, but ones that are actually needed and not easily found elsewhere.
Exactly. And the critical thing here is that learning can't just stop when you leave university or finish your initial training. That skill set you build early on, it probably won't be enough for a 50 or 60-year working life.
Continuous learning becomes non-negotiable.
Absolutely. The book touches on that whole specialist versus generalist debate too. Should you go deep in one area like STEM or have broader skills, maybe like an updated liberal arts approach?
What do they suggest?
They kind of imply that over a very long life, having a combination might be best. Some deep expertise, but also the breadth to adapt, connect ideas, and pivot when needed.
Makes sense. They also mentioned something about a posse.
Yeah. Your work-based posse, those small, trusted groups of colleagues, people you learn with, share challenges with, who support your professional development, not just superficial networking, but real, deep connections at work.
That sounds really valuable. And reputation is part of this, too.
Hugely important, especially if you're transitioning between stages or even sectors. A good reputation being seen as trustworthy, competent, fair, that's an asset that travels with you.
And it's built over time through how you act, right? Not just where you went to school initially.
Precisely. Your behavior, your interactions, the quality of your work. And they add a modern caution in our digital age. With social media and online profiles, managing that professional reputation requires conscious effort.
Okay, so productive assets are skills, knowledge, networks, reputation. What's the second category?
Vitality assets. This is all about your physical and mental health, your overall well-being. Think energy levels, stress management, but also the strength of your close relationships, family, close
The
friends.
foundations, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The book points to rising levels of work-related stress globally and how tightly work and home life are now interwoven. If
Yeah.
you're burning yourself out in that traditional second stage of relentless
Your
work,
vitality assets suffer.
exactly, they get depleted. So investing in your health, managing stress, nurturing those close bonds, it isn't just nice to have. It's essential for sustaining yourself over a long life and career. It directly impacts your productivity too.
You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. Okay, what's the third type?
The third category is transformational assets.
Transformational. What does that cover?
This is about your ability to navigate change and make successful transitions. It includes things like self-knowledge, really understanding yourself, your values, your motivations. It also includes having diverse networks.
Diverse networks. How is it different from the work posse?
The posse is often people quite similar to you in your field. Diverse networks are about connections with people different from you, different ages, industries, backgrounds, perspectives. These networks expose you to new ideas, new possibilities, new role models, which is crucial when you're considering a change.
Ah, okay. They open up your world.
Exactly. And the third part of transformational assets is simply being open to new experiences. Willingness to try things, to learn, to adapt.
So these assets are key for managing that multi-stage life we talked about.
Precisely. The book states it clearly. Across a 100-year life, people will experience great change and many transitions. These transformational assets refer to their self-knowledge, their capacity to reach out into diverse networks, and their openness to new experiences.
And that self-knowledge piece, they call it the reflexive project.
Yeah, it sounds a bit academic, but it basically means continuously asking yourself questions. Who am I now? Who do I want to become? What are my strengths? What needs to change? It's about self-awareness and actively shaping your future self.
And those diverse networks help with that by showing you different ways to be.
They provide inspiration and practical support for making transitions. The book even makes the slightly tough point that sometimes to transform, you might need to consciously let go of old connections or old ways of thinking that are holding you back.
Interesting. So transformational assets are about knowing yourself, connecting broadly, and staying open.
You got it. They're the engine for change and adaptation throughout a long life.
Okay, so bringing this back to the listener, to you tuning in right now, it's worth asking, what skills are you actively investing in beyond your current job requirements?
Yeah, and how are you really looking after your vitality, your health, your key relationships? Is that getting enough attention?
And how open are you genuinely to exploring new things, trying a side project, considering a career shift down the line, meeting people outside your usual bubble?
The book has this nice idea of balancing recreation with recreation.
Recreation. Explain that.
Well, recreation is downtime, fun, consumption, relaxing, all necessary. But recreation is about using some of your non-work time to actively invest in those intangible assets.
Like using leisure time to learn a new skill, or focus on fitness, or intentionally connect with friends and family.
Exactly. Not just consuming entertainment, but actively building those assets that will sustain you long term.
That's a powerful reframe of leisure time.
It is. And thinking about possible selves can help too.
Possible selves.
Yeah. Actively imagining different versions of yourself in the future. The successful professional self, the healthy active self, the connected family self. Visualizing these can motivate you to take actions today that lead towards those futures.
Like setting goals based on who you want to become.
Right. The book also floats ideas like pop-ups and prototypes.
Sounds trendy. What does it mean?
It's about experimenting. Maybe doing short-term independent projects, freelance gigs, even starting a small side business at any stage of life. It's a way to test out new skills, build reputation in a new area, explore possibilities without making a huge commitment.
Like dipping your toe in the water before diving in.
Precisely. And they mention how the sharing economy might help here too. Renting out assets, finding flexible work, making it easier to live asset light during these exploratory or transitional phases.
So it's less about one single career path and more about crafting a portfolio.
Yeah, a portfolio of activities, skills, and experiences that evolves throughout your potentially much longer working life.
Okay, let's swing back briefly to the money side of things. We talked about the pressure on Jimmy and Jane.
The need for much higher savings or working significantly longer.
The book really pushes the importance of financial literacy, knowing the basics.
Definitely. They even include some standard financial literacy questions to make the point. Want to try a couple on our listeners?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, question one for you listening. Imagine you have $100 in a savings account and the interest rate is 2% per year. After 5 years, if you just leave the money in there, roughly how much do you think you'd have? More than $102. Exactly $110, or just over $110.
Good one. Okay, question two. Let's say the interest rate on your savings is 1% per year, but inflation is running at 2% per year. After 1 year, would you be able to buy more, the same amount, or less with your savings than you could today?
Think about those for a moment. We'll give you the answers at the end.
But the book makes a crucial point beyond just knowing this stuff. They talk about financial agency.
Agency, meaning actually doing something about it.
Exactly. It's not enough to know you should save more or understand compound interest. It's about overcoming inertia, self-control problems, procrastination, all those behavioral biases that stop us from acting in our own long-term financial best interests.
Actually making the plan and sticking to it.
Right. And they also emphasize the need to plan for your older self. Thinking about retirement income, yes, but also potential healthcare costs and even the possibility of cognitive decline later in life and how you'd manage your finances then.
Sobering thoughts, but necessary ones.
Very necessary. They specifically caution against relying too heavily on assumptions like, oh, I'll just sell my house, or my expenses will drop dramatically in retirement.
Those might not be safe assumptions.
Often they're not. Proactive saving and deliberate financial planning are key. You can't just drift into a comfortable retirement in this new reality.
Okay, so we need to manage our intangible assets, manage our finances. The book also suggests we need to rethink time in work itself, right?
Absolutely. There's been this long historical trend towards working fewer hours, gaining more leisure time. They even quote Keynes from way back.
The Economist.
Yeah, back in the 1930s, he was already pondering, how to use his freedom from pressing cares, how to occupy the leisure which science and compound interest will have won for him, to live wisely and agreeably and well.
Remembering what we'd do with all the free time technology would give us.
Exactly. But the 100-year life might complicate that trend. If we need to fund a longer life, does that mean the decline in working hours stalls or even reverses for some?
Or maybe we just structure work differently.
That seems to be the more likely and perhaps more desirable path. The book questions whether the standard 9 to 5, 5-day week makes sense stretched over a 60 or 70-year working lifespan.
It sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. So we're likely to see much more variety in working patterns. Maybe shorter work weeks become more common, maybe 3-day weekends, job sharing, more flexibility, things designed to help us preserve our energy and vitality over the long haul.
But presumably, demanding skilled roles might still need intense periods.
Probably. But the argument is that even then, there will need to be more substantial planned periods of downtime, proper breaks for family, for health, for that essential reskilling and recreation we talked about. Not just a couple of weeks holiday a year.
A different rhythm to work and life.
A fundamentally different rhythm.
And this long life impacts relationships too, doesn't it?
Mm.
Partnerships, families.
Massively. The book notes the huge social changes that even someone like Jimmy, born 71, has seen regarding marriage, divorce, family structures. The rise of dual career households is a big one. That creates complexity in balancing two careers, family responsibilities, and managing both partners' tangible and intangible assets. It requires a lot more negotiation and coordination.
Yeah, I could see that.
And people are generally marrying later. If you live to 100, the proportion of your life spent raising young children might actually be smaller than for previous generations.
Which leaves more time for other stages, other focuses.
Potentially, yes. They also touch on the possibility of more multi-generational living, maybe driven by housing costs or care needs, and the growing importance of cross-age connections generally, including friendships across different generations.
Fighting loneliness in later life.
Exactly. Those broader social ties become even more vital for well-being across a longer lifespan.
So individuals need to adapt, rethink finances, time, relationships.
Yeah.
But the book also says society needs to change too, right? This isn't just an individual challenge.
No, definitely not. They briefly touch on the need for systemic change. Governments need policies that support people through these different life stages, address health inequalities that impact longevity, maybe rethink pensions and lifelong learning support.
Educational institutions need to adapt too.
Big time. Shifting from a front-loaded education to genuine lifelong learning models, breaking down age barriers, teaching skills relevant for a multi-stage future like adaptability, critical thinking, collaboration.
And corporations.
They need to embrace flexibility, move beyond age biases, recognize caregiving responsibilities, maybe rethink traditional retirement pathways altogether. It requires a fundamental redesign across the board.
So it's a huge societal shift, demanding changes at every level.
It really is. The 100-year life isn't just about individuals living longer, it's about restructuring life itself.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together. For you, the learner, listening today,
Yeah.
what are the absolute key takeaways?
Well, first, accept that the 100-year life, or at least a significantly longer life, is a real possibility for you and requires a different approach.
Right, step one is getting your head around the new reality.
Second, the old three-stage model, education, work, retirement, is outdated. Think instead in terms of a multi-stage life with more transitions and variety.
Be prepared for change, basically.
Third, shift your focus beyond just finances. Actively invest in and manage your intangible assets, your productive skills, your health and relationships, vitality, and your ability to adapt and transform.
Those assets are crucial fuel for the long journey.
Fourth, get serious about financial planning. Understand the basics, take action, agency, and plan proactively for a potentially long retirement. Don't rely on wishful thinking.
Take control of your finances.
And fifth, be prepared to rethink how you structure your time, your work, and maybe even your relationships to sustain yourself physically, mentally, and socially over a much longer time span.
It's about designing a sustainable life for the long run.
That's a great way to put it.
So some concrete next steps someone could take today.
Reflect on your own plans. How does this 100-year life lens change things? Then pick one small thing, just one. Maybe sign up for that online course to build a skill, productive asset.
Or schedule a walk with a friend you haven't seen, vitality asset.
Or reach out to someone interesting outside your usual field, transformational asset. Just start somewhere.
And maybe talk about these ideas with your partner, your family, your friends. It impacts everyone.
Definitely. It's a conversation worth having.
Okay, before we wrap up, those financial literacy questions.
Ah, yes. Question 1. $100 at 2% for 5 years. With compound interest, you'd have just over $110, so slightly more than simple interest would give you.
And question 2, 1% interest versus 2% inflation. After a year, can you buy more, less, or the same?
You'd be able to buy less. Inflation is eroding the purchasing power of your money faster than the interest is growing it. A really important concept to grasp.
Definitely. Worth looking into more if those weren't immediately obvious.
Absolutely. Financial literacy is a key skill for this long life.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to take away and chew on. Given that you might genuinely live for a century, maybe even more, what's one fundamental belief you currently hold about how your life should be lived that you might now need to reconsider?
That's a deep one to ponder.
It is. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today into the 100-year life. We hope it's given you some useful insights and maybe sparked some new thinking.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. In the meantime, we'd love to hear what you think. Find us, mention where listeners can connect, for example, on social media, website.
Thanks for listening.